Hi, this is Julia from Geopolitics Alert. I'm here with James Carey, and today we're pleased to have our guest Raffi Ourlian, who is the leader of the Armenian-American Community Center of Michigan, here on our show today, on our series on the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia and the siege on the Artsakh province.
And I suppose I'd like to start out with the question of, let's just get into what is the historical significance of Nagorno-Karabakh and Artsakh in Armenian history and to Azerbaijan.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and thank you for both of your time on this. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this and discussing such a sensitive issue. Armenia is the first Christian nation. We were the first country to adopt Christianity, and obviously through our history of thousands of years, we've always, just the region has always been, in a region with wars and evolving. Most noticeably, recently, I would say, within the last 105 years was the Armenian genocide. Armenia was a much larger country than we are today. We were the first genocide in the 20th century committed by the Ottoman Turks, or Turkey, and we lost a lot of land. And Artsakh, or Nagorno-Karabakh, has historically been Armenian, and through communism, Joseph Stalin decided that he would carve up the region and make new countries up, and he divided up Nagorno-Karabakh and handed it to Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan's only been around for less than 100 years.
All right.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, Armenians have been living in the Artsakh province for thousands of years, and they have a long history in the region. So with that said, why has Azerbaijan been so committed in laying its claims to the Artsakh province?
That's a great question. Yeah, Azerbaijan's only been around for less than 100 years. I think they were formed or created in 1918, roughly, but it is certainly less than or close to 100 years, but nothing more than that. I think actually 1928. Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer on what their ambition is, because the people that have lived there, the people that have lived on those lands, have been Armenian for thousands of years. I think it's just their existence is what drives their appetite to make the claim. It's their the fact that it's Armenians that are living on that land that drives them to have this ambition to, again, start a genocide and ethnic cleansing of those lands. And there could also be geopolitical reasons. Pipelines, oil pipelines make a potentially a reasonable business case for them to have claims to that land. It would be speculation, but it's merely their hatred towards Armenians.
The last time we saw a flare-up like this was in 2016. So my question really is, why is this happening again now? What is behind the timing of this current conflict in the region?
I think what happened in 2016 was just a flare-up, and when this started, I would say that most Armenians were thinking, okay, here's the latest skirmish, and it's going to be over in a couple of days. But that's certainly not the case. It's an intent to invade. It's a big difference from what happened in 2016 and what happened in August. This is clearly a much larger scale, and it could be related to U.S. politics, because that the current administration could be so focused in on re-election and COVID, this pandemic, and they're thought that the timing of this would be fine. And it's also the fact that Turkey, who's also involved with this, has had some recent successes over the last 6 to 12 months, specifically with Libya. There are issues with drilling on the shores of Greece for oil, and then Syria, the Idlib province, where they've been able to shelter ISIS terrorists, and really they're mercenaries, and they're being utilized today against Armenians.
So Turkey has consistently supported Azerbaijan. However, after the shorter flare-up that happened in July of this year, Turkey has actually backed Azerbaijan with over $1 million, which is at least 10 to 100 times the amount it usually allocates to Azerbaijan in defense support quarterly. So my question to you here is, what has contributed to this sudden increase by Turkey in defense funding? Why now?
Yeah, I think they also had these joint exercises in Azerbaijan back in I think it was July and August as well, where the Turkey and Azerbaijan did these joint military exercises. But Turkey's been very ambitious. I think that this is also part of a cover. They have an economy that's failing. They have people are getting frustrated there with the same issues. Journalists being locked up. Anybody that's a descendant or that speaks against Erdogan gets locked up. So I think it's just it's an ambition that they have. It's an ambition that they want to control more. They're most recently, I believe Erdogan met with Ukraine president and offered to provide them military protection, and spoke about Crimea. So Turkey has become or attempted to become a much bigger player in the region, very ambitious, and some would say to return back to the Ottoman days where they controlled much more than what they have. And it's also, again, you have oil, you have pipelines at play, and it's just, I think they just want to be the big player, and potentially one day they're going to have a confrontation with a country that's going to stand up to them.
So Turkey is flooding Azerbaijan with the same mercenaries that it has backed in Syria. So these are mercenaries that are typical radical Sunni jihadists, and given that now in Azerbaijan they seem to be in Shia territory, obviously despite the material similarities and shared objectives that Azerbaijan and Turkey face against Armenia, it's kind of unclear how much this ideological incompatibility between the Sunni militants and the area that they're in is going to present itself as a long-term feasible strategy for Turkey. How do you see this play out, and do you see this being feasible for Turkey in the long run?
I do. I think that we were all trying to understand why they were so aggressively protecting Idlib 12, 24 months ago, and they were working to get deals done with Russia and the U.S. to protect that area and that province. Well, I think we know why is because they viewed those fighters there as mercenaries. Now, when those mercenaries get flew into Turkey and into Azerbaijan, they probably don't view those as casualties. I think if they lost thousands of people that are these mercenaries, their population would never know, and they're doing a great job controlling the media, because what they've said is they're in essence a lockdown for journalists. They're not reporting. They're not allowing international reporters to be there. They're not allowing these stories. So they're keeping their population out there in terms of lack of information. And then when this is all over with, they're probably not going to report those mercenaries as casualties, and they'll just say, oh, just a small amount of Azeri military were lost, but that's not really accurate.
So one thing about the Turkish mercenaries, as Julia mentioned, is none of these groups get along. So what exactly is the long-term, in places like Syria, these groups have been granted with authority as security services and things like that. So what's the long-term strategy for keeping those fighters in particular in the region, or are they going to be leaving?
No, agree, and I don't think that they're going to be there long. I think they're only there for this task. That's what they're being paid for. I think when there is a resolution to this, a peaceful resolution, hopefully soon, that they will return. I don't think they have any long-term future there. So they'll probably return back to Idlib.
Or somewhere, wherever Turkey is involved in it next, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. It could be back to Libya. It could be Cyprus. It could be somewhere else that there's a potential issue flaring up.
So Azerbaijan has spent years working with Israel to build a massive drone fleet to the point where they're sending waves of them every day. Do you think this is all that decade or so of working with Israel to arm themselves? Do you think this is all part of a build-up to this event?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this date was on the calendar for some time. I think that Azerbaijan, I believe Turkey, they had this date circled on their calendar that they were going to make this invasion. They're going to start the invasion when they did on September 27. And part of that was acquiring those drones. The drones are a big part of their arsenal, whether it be Azerbaijan or Turkey. Turkey started to use this in Syria, and that's where they saw the successes, and they said, "Oh, this is great. We can do all this and have minimal risk to our soldiers. Oh, and by the way, we can just hire mercenaries for this for other countries," and that's what they've done. So they implement drones, they implement mercenaries, and it's no loss to them other than paying for it, paying for the technology and paying for the mercenaries.
Okay.
So the United States has remained relatively neutral in the course of this conflict. Do you see the U.S. Eventually stepping up and supporting Azerbaijan, given its alliance with Azerbaijan's main backers, Turkey and Israel? Or is this relatively low on the administration's priorities right now?
Yeah, I do believe it's low on the administration's priorities. I believe that the administration spoke earlier today, maybe within the last hour, and they did bring it up, but they brought it up to the perspective that they're aware of it, and they know that there is a lot of Armenian-Americans in the U.S. Voters, is my interpretation, my personal opinion on that. So I don't think it's a priority, because I think that they could have stopped it 2-3 weeks ago by forcing everyone to come to the table. And Armenia and Artsakh have always said, we're willing to come to the table and try to get a resolution on this. And that's the only way it can happen, is if it's done over the table. I don't think that there's a military solution to this, as Azerbaijan thinks.
I'm starting. All right, ready? Yeah. All right. So you believe, as we do, that this is kind of low on the administration's priority list. What is, if there were an outcome that you would like to see the U.S. produce in the region, what would it be? I mean, what actions would you like to see the United States government take?
Yeah, no. I think with this administration, I'm just speaking from that perspective, is going to be hands off. I just don't think that they have the international presence or appetite to do this. I mean, we've seen these moves from them. They are really leaving a vacuum. We've seen that we saw that happen with the Kurds within the last 2 years, where they've abandoned them. And so I just don't think that they have an appetite. So if there is going to be a resolution, it's not going to be something driven by the U.S. Or by this administration, unless they get more pressure put on them to deal with it. But as of now, I just don't see it. And that's the shameful part of it, is that they have an opportunity. They have the power to fix it by sanctioning Azerbaijan, sanctioning Turkey, but they are refusing to address it.
So Russia looks like it's the only large major nation in the region that's been, willing to kind of step forward and try to at least work out some kind of a negotiation. There have been 2 ceasefires, neither of them very successful. But given the position that it's kind of trying to take here, do you see Russia as taking a more involved role as this conflict wages on?
Yeah, I think we've seen, over the last few years, Russia's influence gain in so many different places, just from the fact that Putin seems to be, all over some of these issues. We saw it in Syria, we've seen it elsewhere, and I would say that he's probably plugged into the issues in Armenia, and he, like you said, he does have a base there, and I would presume that he is gonna, if there's gonna be anybody that does anything, it's gonna be him. I think that Iran's always had a good relationship with Armenians, but they have a lot of internal issues right now in the country. The sanctions have really taken a toll on them. The pandemic has, and they have a large Azeri population that's in their country near the border. So they have to tread lightly. So if it's anybody, it would be Russia. I think that Russia would probably want to keep things status quo versus a invasion of Artsakh and an invasion of Armenia potentially. So I would say it would be Russia.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, Russia thus far is kind of the only state actor that's really been acting as some kind of a mediator to an extent. Iran surprisingly has a lot of stakes in the prolongation of the conflict, but it has remained also relatively neutral. Do you see other state actors as potentially stepping forward as this wages on? Given that even Turkey, Russia, and Iran attempted to broker negotiations in Syria.
I don't think so. I just don't think there's anybody right now that's a player in it. I do expect this to go on, and just based on their ambitions. I think that if Aliyev and Erdogan said we're going to stop now, they would look really bad to their country for making an attempt to invade a country and not being successful, and it would be a lot of fallout. I think that this is going to go on for some time, and it's hard to see who's going to be a player. I certainly don't have any insight to it, but politics make some strange decisions, and who knows who steps in and decides to fight against Turkey and Azerbaijan. Certainly Greece has got some. They certainly would want to see Armenia prevail on this. I think a lot of Europe would too.
I think for the most part, the majority sentiment is on the side of the Armenian cause in the West. As far as Iran goes, do you think Iran just is staying out of this due to their own internal reasons because of all the pressure they're under, or do you think it has to do with, as Julia mentioned, negotiations in Syria and things like that Iran has been part of, where they've dealt with Turkey and they have this growing relationship with Turkey? Do you think both play a factor, or is it one or the other?
It could. I would say that that's part of it, but I also think the bigger part of it is just their internal conditions. They just cannot. I think if they have any more internal issues, who knows what would happen to the leadership there. And I think that they want to just keep things in the region calm. And that's not to say that they won't help. Who knows what will happen there. I think that the U.S. election date is also a big factor in a lot of these countries on what they're looking at.
So with all, a number of numerous parties becoming involved or being pulled into the conflict, and probably we'll see that more and more as this wages on, do you see any kind of resolution or quelling of this conflict potentially occur as fast as it did in 2016?
Yeah, I think it's just a I hate to say it this way. It's just a lack of leadership from the administration here that could help the situation, and we're really relying on Russia and other countries like France to try to resolve this. But absent something significant, I just think that this is going to continue. What happened in 2016 was it was a 4-day war, but it was a lot of international pressure put on Azerbaijan and Turkey to stop, and they did. It was probably used as a break for them to gain these drones and gain the technologies, and they saw that these mercenaries were a viable option. So that's one of the big differences from 2016.
Now, obviously, there have been steps to get certain levels of government to do things, such as the House resolution passed in Michigan last week condemning Azerbaijan's actions. But what do you feel your role is a member and a community leader in the diaspora, and as far as it relates to this conflict?
Yeah, and we just want peace. In the diaspora, we just want peace for Armenia and Artsakh in the region where, it's tough enough to live in a country as a young person, like, going to college or school and having ambitions. But when you throw in, war and things like that, it shatters families, it shatters dreams. So our goal in the diaspora is to preserve peace and to have everybody live there and recognize Artsakh, recognize that the Armenian people do belong where they are. They do have rights to that land. They are the victims of a genocide. So that's our role in the diaspora, is to help them have a better life where they're at.
Do you personally have a message to the people of Artsakh, to your fellow Armenian-Americans or Armenians?
Yeah, my message would be in the diaspora to, keep up the good work, the protests. We've had several here in Metro Detroit, East Coast, California. So keep up all the good work in raising the awareness and recognition of what's happening. And the Armenians in Artsakh and Armenia, we're with you. We're doing everything we can. We're providing humanitarian assistance. We organize a medical relief committee here locally, and we've been very fortunate that the hospitals here, Beaumont, Henry Ford, University of Toledo, and so many others have donated medical supplies, and we're getting ready to ship them. So to the Armenians there, that we're doing everything we can to help this situation stop and make your life get back to normal.
So the purpose of this project is to spread and raise awareness about the siege on Armenia by Azerbaijan and the conflict in Armenia. So with that said, are there any organizations or efforts that people in the United States, people in the diaspora can support?
I would say that it's at this time it would be medical supplies, and that's being bandages, aspirin, because keep in mind they're in the middle of a pandemic and their cases have been spiking the last couple of weeks, and then monetary donations, and the Armenian Community Center of Greater Detroit would be a place to reach out for more information. We have the nationally, it's the Armenia Fund, and then the Armenian Relief Society are also providing relief to the people there, humanitarian relief.
Again to our guest.
Okay. Thanks again to our guest, Raffi Ourlian of the Armenian Community Center of Greater Detroit, and thank you all for viewing.
Thank you.